I imagine what it must have been like to be a 5-year-old boy with a dream so vivid that you knew exactly what you wanted to be in life. A dream that compelled you to work so hard that you were able to qualify for college by the age of 15. A dream that would further compel you to take the leap and choose consciously to go to medical school in a foreign country, a war-torn land, because it was the best path for you to reach your dream. And to be treating soldiers for everything from wounds to insect bites to viruses and leeches, when you get the best news, which is that you had been selected to go to the US for your medical residency, but to be torn inside because you knew that that meant leaving your family even further behind. I then imagined that young man traveling across the world alone in pursuit of a better life and a better future, and trying to make a way for himself in a new land. And meeting a woman who was different than anything he had ever known, and falling in love, but not being able to share that with the people who meant the most to him. And I imagine that not so young man, 20 years after he left home, the feeling that he would have inside him when he finally got to bring his own father and his sister to be with him in the US, but to also accept that his mother had passed away and he would never meet her again. Good afternoon, I'm Rebekkah Kumar, and I was born and raised in the US by my father, whose story you just heard, and by my mother, who was studying to be a nurse in the same small town where my father was doing his medical residency. They met and fell in love, and they got married, and they had 7 children, and I'm number 6. So today I want to talk to you about fear. Fear is universal. Some fears we're born with, they're innate, and other fears are learned and developed over time. Like my fear of spiders, which I'm quite sure is because my brothers used to hide spiders in my bed when I was a kid just to scare me. But everybody has fear, and we all fear being made fun of or being laughed at or putting ourselves out there. And I know that very well because I was that little girl in the back of the classroom who had her head down every time the teacher was looking to call on somebody, and I was praying she wouldn't call on me. And if she did call on me, I would have these crazy heart palpitations, even if I knew the right answer. So I get it. But know this, even Iron Man had fear, okay? Bahubali bhi dar ko lagta hai, okay? So everybody has fear. And we all share this fear of failure. And the fear of failure can sometimes stop us from really understanding the right path for us in life. It can stop us from trying for things that we deeply want, and it can even stop us from understanding what we truly want. So today what I want to focus on is a fear that I think is often overlooked. And that fear is a fear that's so powerful, it can help you overcome your fear of failure in a split second, and that's the fear of regret. So what is regret? Regret is not the little regrets that you have every day, like when you wolf down a whole large popcorn at the movie theater, or when you skip your run the next morning and you sleep in. That's not the regret I'm talking about. I'm also not talking about the fear of missing out. The fear of missing out is extremely real, and we all experience it in life. But the fear of missing out is transient and temporary. FOMO, or the fear of missing out, does things like make sane people jump out of moving cars and dance to Drake's In My Feelings, or do the ice bucket challenge when they live in sub-zero temperatures. And the fear of missing out is what made me binge watch Game of Thrones, seasons 1 to 7, right before season 8 hit, because I had to know who was this Daenerys Targaryen, and would Jon Snow be the one true king, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about real regret. And so going back to the story of my father, when I was in high school, he asked me to go to Israel with him on summer vacation. And I was excited about, this great adventure, leaving my country for the first time and seeing Israel and having an experience with my father. But ultimately, I turned him down. And I know, like it was yesterday, why I turned him down. And it was because I feared missing out on great adventures with my friends that summer. It was as simple as that. And I knew I hurt his feelings. But my brother went with him, and they had a great time, and they came back with all these great stories and pictures, and they were so full of life. And I was excited for them. But had I understood then what regret was, I would have made a different decision. A couple of years later, when I was in college, my father passed away. I didn't know he was sick. I didn't know he was in the hospital, and I just got a call that he was gone. And because I hadn't been living with him on a day-to-day basis, it took me some time to accept it. And I used to go home, and I would visit home and see his empty chair at the table, or I would write a letter to my, dear mom and dad and realize that I needed to stop. And, it took a couple of years for me to get over that denial. And when I did, I realized that I didn't really know him well. I knew him as my dad and as a doctor, but I didn't know who he was as a child, what it was like to make those gut-wrenching decisions. And that's when I understood what regret was, because I had passed up on the one opportunity I had to ask him those questions and to get to know him. And I realized, that regret was something so important that I never wanted to face it again. And what happened is this fear of regret built up deep inside me. And it compelled me, as I moved forward in life, to fear it so much that it built this huge strength inside me and helped me make more riskier and take more chances on myself and make more decisions that would direct my path forward. And the best example of this is in college itself, which is when right before graduation, all the big companies come and they have campus recruiting. And I didn't get an interview slot for the one company that I wanted to work for. And I found myself slipping a note under the door of the recruiter, and that note said something like, hey, I think there's a good match between what you're looking for and the skill set that I have. And if you give me a chance, I'd really like to discuss it with you on your next break, something like that. And guess what happened? I got the interview, and I got the job offer, and I accepted. And I went to work for that company as an engineer, and it opened a lot of doors for me in the future. And that fear of regret became this powerful tool that I could use to direct myself and direct my life, my big life decisions. And in fact, I used it to help me decide to, after 8 years, give up that engineering career and redirect myself and do my MBA. And then I used it further in the future to decide to put my career on hold for a while and spend time with my children. And importantly, I used it to make the decision to move to India. See, at that time, we were living in Seattle, and we had this beautiful custom home we had built for our children, and we had great jobs and amazing friend circle and neighbors that just took care of us through thick and thin without asking for anything in return. The American dream. And something was missing. I thought about my husband when he was an old man looking back on our life. And I thought about my children struggling to find their own roots. And I thought about the decisions and sacrifices that my father made. And I realized we didn't have to make those sacrifices. So when I understood how important it was to us, that fear of leaving everything behind and moving across the country it flipped on its side, and it became excitement to give my children the opportunity to understand their culture and know their family deeply and learn the language and feel as Indian as they felt American. And, we came here with a 2 to 4 year plan, and it's been almost 14 years, and we're really happy. So this fear of regret is this tool that helps you individually understand what's important enough to you to take a risk, to risk rejection or failure or financial loss. And so just for a minute, if you would, try to get in touch with your own fear of regret. If you would just close your eyes and try to imagine for a moment a big decision that you have, something that's really important to you or to someone that you love, and try to get into a quiet space in your mind and imagine that situation. Maybe it's, you know, you're in love with and you want to propose, or maybe it's a new job that could take you into great new heights, but it's away from your family. Or maybe it's someone who's just retired and they're looking to do something new, but they're scared of what other people will think. Then what you do is you try to imagine just for a moment that you live in a world where you would never fail and nobody would ever judge you. And you feel and you allow yourself to feel and understand that excitement of being successful. And the minute that you reach that excitement and you understand it, you imagine that it didn't happen. You didn't get the job. The person didn't accept your proposal. Or you chickened out and you didn't follow that new path after retirement. And then you have to be really honest with yourself. You know, did you feel relief or apathy? Because if you did, then move on. Put it aside, wash your hands, and move on. It's not important enough to you. But if you feel that deep pain inside you, that pain that can haunt you day and night and keep you awake and make you realize that this is important enough to you, that's regret. Regret can find its way into your heart and find a quiet space where only you can visit when you're honest with yourself. And so if you have that fear of regret, or if you find that you will experience regret with this situation, then you know that you will take the steps necessary and do the hard work and make what was an obstacle into a challenge, and you'll overcome it. And guess what? If you do all of that hard work and you put the resources in and you take the chances and you face rejection and you still fail, that's okay. Because at least you failed doing something that was meaningful enough to you to make that risk. And the failure that you have behind you is now lessons that will fuel you on your success that you're meant to have in the future. Because as Albert Einstein said, every failure is just a success in progress. So there's one more example that I'd like to share with you, and that's when the fear of regret helped me to start my own business. And you know, we had been living here for a number of years, and my children were settled. My husband had a great job, and I started working again, and I was happy. But I felt a little bit empty inside, and I felt like as the years passed, when the more settled my family got, the more isolated I felt. I kind of feel like it was because I still felt like a foreigner here, like an outsider. And I needed to do something deeper and richer, something to build my own roots in India. So I started looking at starting businesses, and where could I add some value. But honestly speaking, giving up your salary for a while to stay home with your children is one thing, but risking your entire, nest egg, everything that you have ever built on an idea is another. And all I could see is all the challenges and the barriers, the financial barriers. Even if we bootstrap this company, we would eventually need funding. The market barriers, others had more resources. How would we compete? My language barriers. I would have to talk to cardigans and companies across the country. And learning barriers, because I didn't know jewelry and jewelry design. And so I was pretty much ready to just put it behind me and give up when I did the same exercise that I asked you to do. And it's not a 2-minute exercise, it takes time, but I try to envision myself successful in this role that I wanted, in creating and establishing my own roots here. And I envision myself as an entrepreneur with this great team and this great idea. And I realized that every step I had taken in my life journey had led me to this point, and I did have the building blocks to be successful. I had been an engineer. I had been, done e-commerce marketing. I was a consultant. And even being a parent gives you tools to build a great team. And then I realized that all the gaps that we had could be filled by hiring a great team or learning or partnering. And so that fear of failure got kind of pushed in the background, and that excitement about building something came to the foreground, and that's the fear of regret. Because when I understood that I could be successful if I really put everything into it, I didn't want to give it up. And I wouldn't regret. I would not allow myself to not take that chance. And what happened is we built this beautiful brand, and our first collection of jewelry came in, and I held that collection in my hand, and I cried. And I cried because with my team, we had created something new and special. And we created it to celebrate India. And we created it for the community in India. And to me, that meant my connection was complete, and I could call India my home. So the fear of regret is about allowing yourself to understand what's important enough to you to take a risk. So in closing, I would like one wish for each of you, and that is that when you face your journey forward, and you come to a crossroad where you have to make a big decision, you will give yourself the mind space to get in touch with your fear of regret. And I hope that your fear of regret will always, always be greater than your fear of failure. Because when that happens, I know you will see a clear path forward, and all those distractions will fade away, and what was once daunting to you will now seem like the choice that you were always meant to make. And take that step, because I promise you, you won't regret it. Thank you.